This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilbur. And here we are in 2024. And, Doug, we talk a lot about healthcare because you're in the home care, healthcare business.
Right.
And I think so many of us don't realize how intense home care, healthcare can be. And
Mhm.
especially now with weather being bad and, you know, some of your clients probably can't even leave their homes because of the
Right.
weather conditions. So, how do you want to address this today?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because what I really wanted to talk about today was um, a, a care model, and the care model that we have, but I believe one that is necessary in order to do care that is optimal for the people that are aging or who have chronic conditions. And it's really kind of probably the best way to say would be patient centered or client centered care, with the idea that you are really looking at the individual needs of someone and then trying to create uh, the 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 matrix where that person can do well based on their needs, not based on like a cookie cutter
Sure.
approach. And I we've talked enough that I think you realize that I really am not. I have real issues with a cookie cutter approach. Not that there isn't reason why it was developed in facilities, and not that facilities haven't tried to overcome that, but really more that home care is specifically designed to address that. And so now it's a matter of like, how do we do that well? How do we see an individual as an individual and shape a plan around that? So the plan can look like, I was with someone yesterday, and essentially with what their needs were, it was, an older person trying to take care of that person's, spouse, and and really running into an obstacle, which is that they themselves have health issues, and so to adequately meet those needs, but also to understand that if we figure it out, um, it may not mean extensive care. It may mean that all that person needs is a handful of hours, in the morning, because
Sure.
that's where there's the issues and a lot of the work that's being done. And then if we can get over that hump, then that person will do fine. And or actually both people will do fine. And so patient-centered or client-centered care really first and foremost has to look at what, that individual and where their problems, where their issues, where their needs are. And then as a company, we adapt to that, within, obviously, I mean, within parameters, but as best as we can, we want to create something that will address those needs for that person. And that can be, very much in the physical level. Um, but actually helping with chores around the house, or with being involved in doing things like bathing and grooming, or other things that are very much on the personal care level, and or what they would call the ADLs or IADLs, but then kind of emotional. what's going to give emotional. So the example of a spouse could be that one spouse goes out to the store and knows that they can leave their husband for an hour, but if it goes over an hour, they start getting really, really nervous.
Sure.
Like, oh my gosh, I have to get back. What's going to happen if this person tries to get up and falls? And so they never truly relax. So they feel like they are always responsible and never sort of able to at least for a while hand it to someone else to say, you take on the responsibility, at least initially, of health and welfare. And even though I'm still kind of ultimately responsible, because we don't want to take that away from someone, but I can have the relief that I don't have to worry. They're in good hands.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It reminds me of my mother taking care of my dad in about the last year of his life.
hmm,
There were days that he was very functional and could do everything he had to, but there were many days where he could barely get out of bed. My father was 5'11", my mother was 4'11", and my mother didn't want anybody to help her, and she did it. We have no idea how she took care of him. Um,
yeah,
and my father, when he knew he needed help, he was willing to let her help. But there were times that he didn't really need it, but she read him wrong. And that's hard on people as well.
yeah. Oh yeah, I do think that, the understanding when I started this, one of the things that had motivated me is that the healthcare system is, I wouldn't say it's broken. I would say it is kind of scotch taped together.
Yeah,
And and that it people are, and in part that scotch tape together has happened because we've had lots of changes.
sure.
Healthcare is really different when you essentially had largely two specialties. You had your practitioner who concentrated more on just like more the medical end of things, and then you had the person that did more of the surgeries. And frankly, not too long ago, I mean, within my lifetime, there were a lot of people that were general practitioners that were doing surgeries.
Right, right.
And so we aren't very far away from that. So within my lifespan, very young lifespan, I will tell you, so, so within my lifespan, we've seen the rise of specialties and now subspecialties within specialties, so that someone who is going through residency program is not only going through the residency program, but then they're doing a fellowship afterwards, because then they can be that subclass
Sure.
of their specialties. And so you used to have kind of the family home for medicine, and that doctor would refer, the doctor would make rounds in the hospital and all sorts of things. Well, most doctors especially in urban areas, are not making rounds in hospitals more.
Right.
You have hospitalists, you have people that are, specialists within the hospital that are doing that. So the doctor who was kind of the quarterback is in many ways far less the quarterback than they used to be. Because the quarterback not only snapped the ball and threw it, but ran and did all sorts of things.
Sure.
To kind of stretch this analogy. And now, they're just kind of standing and tossing the ball, and so often even the patient is kind of running with the ball on their own. and going to their own specialist and making their own choices. And it's, there's much more of a consumer type of mindset, even with patients at this point in time. So the healthcare system is trying to catch up with that and catch up with the advances in medicine and catch up with all sorts of things. And frankly, I can see that in healthcare in general, that's going to just exponentially grow because frankly, I think artificial intelligence is going to do a lot of things that doctors used to do, in helping to kind of work through things. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a really good thing, but like who's kind of minding the whole
Exactly.
yeah. So I do think with a patient-centered model, at least with the piece that we control, I think I'm a real big advocate that as a company and as an agency, as a healthcare practice of some sort, we can help a little bit in understanding what the need is. And the way we structure our company is we actually have care managers who are doing the schedules and other things. So the attempt is to look at that person as a whole person, to, as the needs change, try to change and work with the families to make those changes, and or the individuals, if they're making the decisions, and then try to create a plan that is taking in all the components and the desires of the individual and the needs of the individual and the economics of the individual, and say, how can we make this work? And
Getting to know that individual, I think, is the key. I think for many of us, we've talked about in the medical field today, I see like a half a dozen different doctors. And even though all my information is in one chart, they don't seem to know what the other one's doing. And I've had to correct them a couple of times, and they'll say, well, I'm going to put you on this medication. I'm going, no, I can't take that because of, and so when you can be your own advocate, that's great. But when you can't be, as many of your clients are, you have to get to know who are the people who know you best, and also, not treat you like somebody who doesn't know what's going on.
Right. Yeah. As we're kind of developing and moving along, one of the things, because we see the need and because, that's in part what compelled me to start it. It's that process of how do we help to manage or help others is probably a better way to manage that care, whether it be that individual or a family member or the interested party, that we come along and we say, here's the part that we can do. You may have heard of my analogy of the Dutch boy in the dike.
Yes.
Yeah. That and I really think that's a good way of looking at the care, but it's a little bit still explaining things in a responsive way. But what the idea is that the Dutch boy in the fable had found the hole in the dike, and it was spilling out water, so he stuck his finger in the hole and kept it intact and saved the town from destruction, if I remember the story right.
Yep.
And what I will oftentimes try to explain to a client is that's what we're really doing. We're looking and saying, where are the gaps? What's going to be the thing that could, go from a leak to a full-on flood, and how do we patch it up with with whatever needs to be patched. And so sometimes that means a caregiver. Sometimes that means a piece of equipment. Sometimes that means a doctor's visit. There's all sorts of things, or scheduled care. Sometimes it means getting PT or OT into the house in order to do it. But and we're not acting per se as the quarterback, but what we're trying to do is say, here's where that need is, here's where we can step in, and here's how we can keep it intact. But it is looking at the individual. And that is the critical part. If you don't look at the individual and you're just trying to kind of do a standard approach, I think that we're missing a really significant part of the power of care, and specifically the power of home care. Now, before we started, you mentioned something about that you had a conversation with a doctor this morning.
Right.
And you were kind of talking about this. What was the essence of that? I'm really kind of curious.
So this is one of these doctors that I'm sure you know of concierge medicine, where you pay membership. And she happens to be in the DC area. And so that's what her practice is. But she actually goes to the home of her patients that need her to come to their homes. So that's how she's gotten to know, wait a second, this patient really needs me to come to their home. No, this patient doesn't need me to come to their home as much. And she said, it takes a lot of time to put all that together. She said, but she believes that her patients / clients have a better frame of reference for their health. They know what they're capable of doing. They know that, hey, I can try to do something else that maybe you once told me I couldn't. And the way she talked about it, I was thinking about my own medical care. I came back from Texas, both my husband and I came back from Texas with infections, totally separate. We hadn't been even sleeping in the same bed because of where we were. And we couldn't figure out, how are we both sick like this? And his doctor suggested one thing. Same doctor for me suggested something else. And it finally took going to see a second doctor who took samples and things and finally said, this is what it is. And
did you guys have both the same thing?
Yes,
or was it,
but in different ways. So what we ended up with, and I've never heard of it, and the doctor said he never heard of it either, but I have a yeast infection in my ears. And it's from wearing my hearing aids all the time. My husband had a yeast infection behind his knees. We're not quite sure, they're not moist or anything else.
Yeah.
And we weren't, like I said, we weren't in the same bed or anything else like that. But they said that the bacteria can, if you touch yourself and then you touch another person, it can spread.
Yeah.
But the first doctor was telling him he had dermatitis, told me, oh, don't worry about it. Your ears are going to itch. And it took us almost 2 weeks now to finally have somebody say, hey, this is what we got to do for you.
Yeah, I could see why there would be like a disconnect between the ears and the.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
but the fact that we said, this is where we were, this is when it both started. And when they took a picture of inside my ear and behind his knee, it looks exactly the same.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, but again, it would be, and I understand why it's not this way in a lot of cases, but doctors today in this industry, they don't have enough time. Okay. They're on the clock from the medical company that they work for. And that's why listening to this doctor today was like, it sounded like what you do in home care. And that's what she's doing as her medical practice.
Well, I've had so often clients say to me, you've told me things that my doctors never said. Now, I'm not practicing medicine, so
Sure.
I'm not doing
Right.
anything like, you know, but there are things that a doctor could address that we also can address. It's, that, um, and, but the problem is that the physicians really don't have time. And one of the things I try to give when I go in is the opportunity to fully understand what's going on. So it is not unusual for me to spend 2.5 hours in that initial intake.
Sure.
Um, and it's really trying to understand. Now, I'm oftentimes asking, like, health wise, what's going on and what medicines um, and different things like that where I'm trying to understand what could arise or what could become a problem. But even with the questions that I'm asking, I'm assessing, is someone, having having issues with recall? Is there the possibility of dementia coming in? Is there any neurological things that I'm noticing, that, and what are the barriers that they're having in their homes and things. So it's really trying to understand so that we can go in a non-medical way and assist that person.
Sure.
But it really comes with a beginning understanding of, what's hard, what's the diagnosis they've been given by doctors or folks in the medical system, other things, and then, what are the implications of that will happen. And so often I was just talking to my internal staff, and they were saying something about uh, something that was going on with one of the clients, and I said, "You do realize that this is a common way of coping with the condition that person has." And I said, I've seen it over and over and over. So that this is related to that. And there were some behaviors that were involved with it that are not good behaviors as far as the, impact that it
Sure.
was having. But I said, but it's happened often enough, and then we're seeing this pattern with this condition that there is actually a link, and it doesn't excuse the behavior that might be tied to it, but it at least shows that there's something that pushes that individual in that direction. And but you have to understand that, and then you can address it. You can say, what is it that behind it that's creating that behavior that's linked in with this particular disorder? And then you can actually potentially address it by first understanding it. So, to understand your clients, you have to understand your clients. You have to
Exactly.
know them. Yeah.
Yeah, I have
And
a friend who has a mother who has very severe dementia at this point. And the caregiver in the morning, she comes in and helps the mother take a shower or a bath, and the mother fights it.
oh
But
yeah.
once the shower or bath is done, she's absolutely fine. She's the happiest person. And it took time for my friend to understand what was happening. And the caregiver kept telling him over and over again, this is normal behavior. I'm prepared for it. I may not like it, but I'm prepared for it and I know what to do. And when they shared that with me, I was thinking about my mother's situation. And there, my mother was bedbound, but she didn't realize she was. And when they would come in to want to bathe her, she fussed. It was, why are you touching me? And once she was bathed, she was the happiest lady.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
they sort of told me a couple of times, you may want to walk out because she's going to yell, she's going to scream. But I guarantee you, when you walk back in here, she's going to be happy and smiling. And she would
Yeah.
tell you, oh, I loved my bath. So,
After she's done, right?
right after she's
Yeah.
done. So,
Yeah.
again, understanding it and having somebody who has seen this behavior before and knows that it's, fairly normal, makes you realize, okay, it's just something that we now have to deal with.
Right. Was normal for her.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that for someone else, if they were yelling or screaming, you might think what is going wrong
Exactly.
with this?
Exactly.
And but for her, that's kind of the normal behavior. And and then you start figuring out workarounds too. And that's the other thing is the what are those workarounds? And I one of the things that I probably mentioned before, but it's still like an important story that happened in my family. But the caregiver for my mom really understood that she was a slow eater. She'd been with her, she got that. So my mom would, if a meal was brought to her, she would eat the whole meal, but it would literally take her an hour and a half to do it. And there were certain cues that this person would do that would help my mom stay on task, but she would always finish it. And I always think that if she had been in a facility, even a really good facility, they would have said, oh, you're not hungry. My mom wasn't greatly communicative at the point, and so probably wouldn't have been able to express anything, and or may have not been hungry that second, and would not have finished her meal, and no one would have thought twice about it or been able to kind of see, oh, this is the pattern that she follows. And that's what I keep on going back to. This is why I so strongly believe in home care, but not just any home care, because what you absolutely need in this situation is the right caregivers, people who are compassionate, who are empathetic, who understand that like what and who they're dealing with, so they're seeing the person as a person, and they're conscientious, they actually care, they
Yeah.
care that they're doing a good job. So you have to get the right people in place, so that is incumbent on the home care company to try to find those people, and that's a gift. There aren't,
Absolutely.
I mean, we'll look at the healthcare system in general. Those characteristics are important throughout healthcare, and think about how few people actually have that. There, but also think about how incredibly good those people are. You know, it's pretty amazing, and you can recognize it. It doesn't take long to look and say, this is that type of person, and so you have to get those right people in place. Unfortunately, one of the issues and one of the problems in care is that care, is increasingly expensive. So finding those people that do that, and then trying to pay for it,
Right,
and reward
exactly.
them for those behaviors, but there's kind of a cap. There's only so much an individual is able to pay if they're paying out of pocket, unless you're incredibly wealthy, and but most of Americans are not incredibly
Right,
wealthy.
exactly.
So
My
how do
mother
we?
had one woman, she came in every Thursday. So my mother was in care for about 12 weeks. But she figured out, I think she sort of knew my mother at the facility, but she would come in and she knew my mother was a take charge person. And she'd walk in and she'd say, "Okay, Dorothy, I'm here. It's meeting time." And she would have so-called meetings with my mother her whole shift. And you'd
Mhm.
walk into the room and she'd say, "It's not lunchtime yet, Dorothy's in a meeting right now." And you could see the difference in my mom, you know, whether she totally understood it or not, this person captivated her for her whole session. And,
Right.
you know, I don't know if I could do that, but it takes a special person to get to know you and provide you with the things that, make you feel good.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've found is that there's no cookie cutter caregiver either. There's some commonalities, conscientiousness, caring, that are important, that kind of cross the board. But boy, we have different personalities, different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different education levels, and we have great people that come from all of those different backgrounds, and each one sort of has their place in the care spectrum of who we're caring for. Um, and what I mean by that is not that, even that's not a cookie cutter. It's oftentimes, I think that temperament is going to work well, and it's a little bit like being, a yenta, I think, as far as like trying to figure out how to match up that person in
Right.
the right way.
Absolutely.
So anyway, these are thoughts. One of the things that I want to maybe close with is, as a company, we are definitely not perfect or there or anything. That a lot of this is we see the need, and as a company, we're committed to seeing how we can be a part of this whole new industry of home care, and help to shape that, help to be the pioneers and what that looks like. And that's, one of the things that motivates me on a daily basis. Like, how can I create models or create structures where we can do this well, where and it, how can we look at it as an individual and meet those needs as a agency, so that that person definitely gets the maximum benefit um, of doing well, as they age or as they have chronic conditions. So as a company, that's our commitment. That's, like, as I mentioned, one of the things that is a driver. And so I really believe over the next year, that's going to be one of, our big focuses is, how do we tweak to make this become more and more a model for others. So,
Well, we're very grateful for you and your staff, and hopefully others out there are picking up on some of these tips that we bring, and hopefully there'll be more caregiving individuals like you and your staff. We'll see you
that
next
sounds
week.
good.
Take
Thanks.
care
Take
now.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.